Guys, we all regret maxing certain champions in Raid Shadow Legends, and today I'm going to give you 5 champions that I regret maxing, and ones that you should probably stay away from. Guys, what's up? I'm Felra, sailing the seas of Raid Shadow Legends, and the first champion that I regret maxing, it's gonna be Holzering here. Now, I did the whole thing. I bought his masteries. I didn't book him. I built him out at one point, and now I just don't use him, guys. I really don't use him. Real quick, click the link in the description to get a free Bambus as well as Ugo at level 15. Here's how to do it. Log out of Plarium Play on PC and uninstall. Click the link in the description and register with a brand new email. Launch Raid and complete the tutorial. Go to your inbox and claim your first champ. This is where you'll find your free Bambus as well as Ugo at level 15. This gives you an insane start in Raid Shadow Legends, so click that link and let's crush this together. On his A3, he attacks 4 times at random. Each hit has a 75% chance, books to 100% chance of placing a Hex debuff for 3 turns, and a 30% decreased speed debuff for 2 turns. Champions from the Bannerlords and Knights Revenant factions cannot resist these debuffs. It also has a 75% chance to steal 25% of the target's turn meter. If the target is from the Bannerlords or Knights Revenant faction, steals 50% of the turn meter instead. Also places a Perfect Veil buff on this champion for 2 turns. It's an interesting move, right? It carries decreased speed and Hex. It's not an AoE. It's a 4 times at random, which is fine for single target boss fights. It hits pretty weak, to be totally honest, and he does have a Perfect Veil, which is good against the Head of Torment, but the fact that it's not an AoE, it's just kind of on a 4-turn cooldown. And then on the Overthrow here, on a 3-turn cooldown booked, attacks one enemy 3 times. If the target is under a Hex debuff, each hit will ignore 25% of the target's defense, will ignore a further 25% of the target's defense if they are also under a decreased speed debuff, will also ignore an additional 25% of the target's defense if they are from the Bannerlords or Knights Revenant factions. Now, this hit does hit hard, especially if you can land a Hex and a decreased speed. It would pair pretty well with Lysanthier Beastbane, right? Would pair pretty well with Lysanthier Beastbane. Of course, it is ignoring defense. It can ignore up to 100% defense with Helm Smasher Mastery. I went with Giant Slayer just because, you know, I could. That was better for where my account was at the time. But, you know, I mean, this is really the highlight of his kit. It's a triple hit, ignore defense. It does hit very hard. It does hit very hard. On the A1 here, attacks one enemy 2 times. If this champion is under a Veil or Perfect Veil buff, each hit has a 50% chance to decrease the target's turn meter by 15%. Places a 50% increased attack buff on the champion for 2 turns if this attack is critical. Now that's kind of nice, right? He carries his own increase attack, which is pretty cool. It's on his A1 though. He does have his own Perfect Veil, which is nice. And then he has a lot of turn meter steal, so of course you can use this guy as a turn meter debuffer. On the passive here, if this champion attacks a target under a Hex debuff and a decreased speed debuff, places a Perfect Veil on this champion for 1 turn. That's a good passive, right? It's a very good passive. This effect will not activate when counterattacking. Also increases this champion's crit damage by 30% while attacking under a Perfect Veil buff. He has some ramping here. Of course, I went with Nature's Wrath as a blessing, but he didn't really fit into any of my teams. He doesn't really fit into any of my teams. I had hoped when the Chimera came out, he might be some good there. I still think he could be some good there, but he's kind of a bit lackluster. He did get buffed last year, and he's still a bit lackluster. Again, this triple hit A2 is the highlight of his kit. Guys, if I were you, unless you need him for some niche use, right, I would not max your Holzering. All right, next is a Void Legendary. I do regret spending resources on this champion. Everybody told me she would be good, and I think she just needs some insane gear to be good. It's going to be Crew Traxa here, my 2nd ever Void Legendary champion. She even still has gear on. Is she in the 4-piece stone skin? I don't know. But, you know, I tried to get her to do some stuff in lethal. It didn't really work out. So what does she have? On her passive, places a Revive on Death buff on this champion for 2 turns at the beginning of each round. Places Revive on Death buff on this champion for 1 turn when this champion kills an enemy with a critical hit. Does not occur with Spiderlings. Yeah, so she just has a Revive on Death, which is really nice, except that Revive on Death doesn't give you any turn meter, which is my main issue with this. And then the Curse of Writhing here, on a 4-turn cooldown, it does not book to a 3-turn cooldown, attacks one enemy, has a 75% chance of placing a 25% weaken debuff for 2 turns, has a 75% chance of removing 2 random buffs from the target, grants an extra turn. The extra turn is kind of nice. It does hit very hard. But her only other skill is her A1, which attacks one enemy 4 times, will ignore 50% of enemy defense, and it reads like it should hit hard, and I haven't gotten it to be able to. Again, very well could be my gear. I just haven't gotten her to be able to hit hard. I know there are a lot of people who like Kutraxa. I'm not necessarily saying she's bad. I'm just saying that for me, she wasn't account changing or anything like that. Kutraxa is someone I would be wary of investing resources in unless you need her for like Curse City Fire Knight or something like that. All right, so now we've got Noct the Paralyzer. Now Noct, I went the whole way with Noct. I booked him too. And to be fair, that wasn't necessarily a bad choice because I do use him in Faction Wars quite a bit. But, you know, I think he could be better. He is a fun champ, just not the greatest. So on his A1, attacks one enemy, has a 50% chance of placing a 50% decreased accuracy debuff for 2 turns. On his A2, attacks all enemies, has a 75% books to 100% chance of placing a sleep debuff for 1 turn and 2 5% poison debuffs for 2 turns. Places on the passive effect here, places 2 additional 5% poison debuffs for 2 turns whenever a sleep debuff placed by this skill is removed or disappears after an enemy takes damage. So he's basically got 4 poisons on his A2, which is very nice. Then on his A3, Petty Fumes, on a 3-turn cooldown booked, places a 50% ally protection buff on all enemies except this champion for 2 turns. Also places a 15% continuous heal buff on all allies for 2 turns. And honestly, that's a very good skill, right? Very good for progression, very good for healing, right? And it's a nice protection skill. He is a HP-based champion. His passive, to me, though, is what I thought would make him so fun. Solemnance heals this champion by 3% of their max HP and all allies except this champion by 1% of this champion's max HP every time a poison debuff ticks on an enemy. Whenever an ally is attacked while under an ally protection buff, has a 40% chance of placing a sleep debuff on the attacker for 1 turn. And honestly, this guy is super fun. He's fun to use. I just didn't need him for where I was at. He's really good early on, but I think he kind of falls off for mid-end game content, especially, you know, when you start transitioning into the late game. Now, I do still use him as my main damage dealer in Faction Wars, and for that, I don't completely regret the books, but other than that, I mean, he is fun to use for, like, random Ice Golem teams and stuff, but Noct the Paralyzer, in my opinion, was not worth the investment. All right, next we've got Morag Bronzelock. Now, don't get me wrong, Morag is a fantastic epic. However, I did not need to 60 her. Like, I did not need to invest the resources into this champion that I did. She doesn't deal damage unless you have her running with War Master, in which case she can because she's got a counterattack passive. Her A1 attacks one enemy 2 times. Each hit will ignore shield buffs. The A2 Outrage, on a 3-turn cooldown, attacks all enemies, places a 25% strengthen buff on all allies for 2 turns. The A3 Raider Captain, on a 4-turn cooldown, teams up with 2 random allies to attack a single enemy. The allies joining the attack will always use their default skills, grants an extra turn if any enemy is killed. You run this lady with an AoE A1, you're good, right? Especially from a damage dealer like the cat. Now, don't get me wrong, Morag is a fantastic epic, especially because of this passive. Counterattacks when hit while under a strengthen buff placed by this champion, and she does have a very unique skill in that she's the only epic that places a big version of strengthen on all allies. However, I did not need to max her, or at least if I did max her, I should have gone all the way and done mastery. I think she's mostly there to just get you up to Fire Knight 20, maybe a little bit beyond. And then for me, she's fallen off basically everywhere except Faction Wars and Curse City. So Morag is a good epic, but maybe not worth the resources to get to 60. All right. Next up is Kaja the Rye. And yes, I know I am picking a lot of champions that a lot of people like. Now, I don't use my Kaja at all, again, outside of Faction Wars. She is built relatively quick, right? 249 speed. Okay, never mind. Not built relatively quick. She has a Journal of Necrotus on. She has an Invigorated on. Like, I've invested in this champion a little bit. I haven't booked her. Maybe things would change if I did book her, but let's see what she does. Attacks one enemy on the Firecracker A1 here. Heals this champion by 10% of their max HP. If any Timets are on the same team, heals all of them by the same amount. Okay, so Timet the Fool is her partner champion and makes her very good. Back with a bang, the A2 here. On a 4-turn cooldown booked, revives all dead allies with 50% HP and 50% turn meter, then places a 30% increased crit rate buff and a 30% increased crit damage buff on them for 2 turns. If Timet the Fool is on the same team and dead, revives them with full HP and full turn meter. If Timet the Fool is on the same team and alive, resets the cooldown and instantly activates their Kegs of Dread skill. So it's actually a good revive, even without Timet. And honestly, this is the reason that I consider using Kaja. She has increased crit damage, which is great. The increased crit rate is all right, but it's really the increased crit damage that makes this so good, as well as the 50% turn meter. Then on our A3, Royal Flush. On a 3-turn cooldown when booked, 5 without books, fills the turn meters of all allies by 20%, also removes 2 random debuffs from each ally. If Timothy the Fool is on the same team, removes all debuffs from all allies, then places a block debuffs buff on all allies for 1 turn. Guys, so again, without books, I don't think she's very good. With books, she might be good. Block debuffs for 1 turn isn't the best, especially if she's the fastest champion on the team. Turn meter fill by 20% is all right. And then she has a 2 random debuffs from each ally cleanse, which is okay. It's okay, right? I mean, she's not bad at all. She's a nice speedy reviver, especially because of her passive here. Dynamic Duo. All turn meter reduction effects from enemies are decreased by 50% when used against this champion. If Timothy the Fool is on the same team, this champion is immune to turn meter reduction effects from enemies. If an enemy tries to decrease this champion's turn meter when Timothy the Fool is on the same team, fills this champion's turn meter by the same percentage instead. Guys, Kaja's by no means a bad champion. Actually, any of these champions are by no means a bad champion, but make sure your account can use them before you invest too heavily in them. Kaja in particular needs books, actually, as does Noct. Kutraxa maybe not. Holzring probably does. Morag probably does as well. Again, Morag can be super good for Fire Knight early on, but do you need to 60 these guys? Do you really need to 60 these guys? It's just something to be aware of. Don't necessarily invest your resources in these champions if you're not sure that you can use them. Guys, what champions do you regret maxing? Let me know in the comments below. I have been Felra, sailing the seas of Raid Shadow Legends, and I will see you in another video.